Thank you, Fred, and thank all of you for being here. I got to say, before I get into my remarks, I am so pleased to see the employer participation, and I think near 130 folks. The vision that we had, the funders had in the beginning, was that we would pull together the support and try to leverage that, but also that at some point in the future, either employers would take the lead completely, or at least continue to be an equal partner. And to see so many employers here is, I got to say, very rewarding for me as a former funder, and more importantly, rewarding for the work. I think without employer participation, I think we would not be as successful as I see with Fred and you all, becoming. So I just want to really acknowledge that and tell you I think it's going to serve you well. It's a win-win for both. So again, that is just fantastic, and I'm so excited to see that this morning. So it is Old Home Week. It's so nice to see so many friends, and the continuation. It's so great that folks are continuing, and the people that have been here and the new folks are coming in, and to see that there was a sellout crowd. I remember the first meeting, which was substantial, but it wasn't a sellout crowd. So again, great work. First, I'm humbled that the president put confidence in me to lead the fund. It is truly humbling. It is a major priority of the foundation. We're working very closely with the White House to make sure that this work continues to not only be successful in our immediate grant making, but we're starting to play a role in helping all other agencies around the federal government think about evidence-based funding. There's a great reluctance in some quarters to continue to fund programs, social service programs particularly, without some sense that they're working. And I'm going to talk a little more about some of the things we're doing. But that is really critical, that we, as a federal government, if we want to continue to support programs that, like workforce, health, education, we're going to need to be more thoughtful about how we collect evidence and show that the work is having results for people in the field. So you are way ahead of that. And I think you're very well situated. I want to, given that this is my 9th day on the job, and I'm a veteran of the administration now, I want to share a little bit of what I'm learning in these first days, and tell you what SIF is doing, and I'm starting to develop a vision for my time there yet. You're not quite there yet, but there are some observations that I think might be useful to you to learn about what I've learned about. So first, I want to say that quite accurately, the National Fund is seen as a shining light within the SIF. It really, many folks didn't know my previous association with SIF, and yet, constantly as I was being briefed by my staff, and others, perhaps even more importantly, throughout the corporation and others, you've talked about how the SIF was such a shining star to be able to point to real results and do the hard work that was necessary. And I know it wasn't always easy in those early days, but you've really come through and pushed to a point where you're really getting recognized and setting a pace for many other programs in the federal government. And I think locally, I met with the mayor of Utah County the other day, and just seeing the excitement across the country, not only the federal level, but the state and local level. I want to take a little time, just a minute, to talk about the data, and I think this is so critical. I know when I was chair, and I know Barbara, we experienced this as well, is that it's so challenging, I think, for many of the folks to take the time to collect this data. And it's very hard when you're trying to do work on the front line, and you've got so much to do and so few resources, to take the time to really do the data in a way that's that is required. But they win programs, and I know these are funders, but I mean employers. But the fact is, your support in this is really important. Investing in ensuring the data is collected is so critical. We wouldn't be able to lift up the National Fund but for the hard work that's been done on the data. And one of the things I'm committed to doing, having been on the other side of the table, is to see how we can streamline that as much as possible. And I know last year there was some work in that, and I want to really continue to see where we can lower the barriers. But if you really want to have a systemic impact over the long term, both the employers and the programs are going to have to be really invested in rigorous evaluation. And that's, at the end of the day, that's really what's going to get you both noticed, but also propelling you forward. The federal funds, it's really hard, I think, to scale anything without public dollars at the end. Philanthropy can play a role, but if you take every philanthropic dollar in the United States, every dollar that from the Gates to Ford, you put it into one bank account, you fund the federal government for about 61 days. So, and we're taking what philanthropy will spend in perpetuity over what the federal government will spend in 1 year. So you see quite quickly that philanthropy plays an absolute critical role. It's kind of the venture capital. I view it as the venture capital of social enterprise. But at the end of the day, we really need government to sustain this. And the way that you get government in a time when there are shrinking resources every day is to show that you have a value proposition to present. And that's why, again, the data, I just can't reinforce enough how important that the data is, and for you and for us. I think that what is going to be part of that, what will be a major focus for me, is telling your story and telling the story of the other folks. We're now 5 years into the SIF. We've got great results. We do have a significant amount of data from across an array of grantees. And what we're really hoping to do is to tell a vivid story about the SIF. And I think we've made great strides, but I welcome all of you to help us tell that story, to think about it. I know that Fred and I and others have thought very carefully about how we tell the story, not just through the data, but how do we bring a human face to it? How do we make sure that people understand that we're changing lives and telling those individual stories? At the end of the day, members of Congress and folks in the administration want to know, it's really that visceral feeling of we're making a difference, and you are making a difference. So this is something that should be quite easy for you to do, and I know that you're already doing it. I think that I want to mention just briefly, it's a very relatively complicated concept, and I'm happy to talk more at a different time if it's useful. But the SIF has, in the last year, embarked on a new initiative within SIF. There's SIF Classic, which you're a part of, and then there's something called Pay for Success. This is I think exciting, I'm cautious, but exciting program that basically flips the idea that federal dollars go out and then people deliver on services, and the results are captured but may or may not inform the future work, or it's not certainly funding isn't immediately dependent upon those the results. What this does is say, let's take a small portion of what the funding, there's about $800 billion conservatively in domestic spending, and right now about 3% is linked in any way to evidence-based results. So what we're saying is, let's take, let's move that up a bit, help those that are reluctant in policy-making positions to fund some of these programs. If we can provide them with this evidence and show them that we will support we'll support results, that I think will increase funding over time, both local and state and federal. So the way it works is that you get an investor, foundation, a basic investor, probably usually like a PRI for program-related initiative, or a corporate entity, who puts the money up front and says, I'm investing, I believe I've seen the promise of this program, I'm going to invest and I'll get a return, but I'll invest and cover the operating costs. And when those programs start to produce results, then the federal dollars are drawn down and supported. Again, I want to be clear, this isn't going to supplant everything in government, but what I think it can do is, in a time where we're increasingly under pressure from Congress and others to deliver on results, that we can, in fact, show results and hopefully increase funding overall for programs like the National Fund. Finally, I want to comment on an interesting fact. Yesterday, the House of Representatives zero funded the fund. This is a common thing. It's 8 days in, so it's very confidence building. But the fact is, I would say, I did spend 11 years on the Hill, and I've been through many of these budget battles. This is the first step. This has happened every year to the SIF, and frankly to the corporation in many years. I just guess I want to just point out that while it's not something we will stop fighting for. I was at the White House last night till 8:30, talking about what we're going to do. But we are going to. I'm very confident the SIF will continue. There may be changes, but I think that there's a bipartisan support for this evidence-based work, and so SIF is on the front line within the federal government, and the White House continues to encourage us to play a leadership role in the space, as well as the SIF work that you're doing, and we're lifting that up and reminding folks that what you're doing is making a difference. So for the last 5 years, this vehicle that zeroed the fund out yesterday hasn't even been the vehicle that funded the work that we do. So what has happened is that appropriation passes in the House, the Senate, and then it doesn't happen, and so it goes into a continuing resolution, which is a whole other bailiwick. So I just encourage you to continue to share what's working, and be sure that that you continue to lift up this story. That's what's going to sustain both your program, but also the SIF work. And let's see, I think that's it. I just want to thank you all. It's great to see you. I hope continue to have conversations. I really want to draw on the lessons learned here and be able to hold it up within the SIF and the federal government as a shining example. So to the extent that you can tell stories and help us do that, fantastic. And thank you again.